Hello everyone, welcome back to the tragic and weaponized Comic Vault. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Eric.
Today, Eric and I are going back to the beginnings of Wolverine, or at least the beginnings after Origin, but made before Origin. We have reviewed together the, kind of the end of a Wolverine.
Old Man Logan.
We have reviewed Old Man Logan. I have, with Dan, reviewed the death of Wolverine.
How was that?
And we like things about
that's
it.
Death of Wolverine. I was thinking Wolverine the End.
No,
there are so many ends of Wolverine.
Right, we see him end a lot. We see him begin a lot in different kinds of ways. Today, we are reviewing something I have wanted to talk about for a long time. This is Barry Windsor-Smith's Weapon X. This came out in trade in 1993. I think the issues were the previous year, of course. And this is a great example of a writer-artist piece, of a thing that really can only happen without the kind of collaboration that you often see in comic books. Now, there is some collaboration
Which
here,
is
certainly.
what the afterword is all about.
That's right, yeah. And I'm not just saying that because I read the afterword, but it echoed some things I was thinking and made me think about it, too. But there is the only person working on this besides Barry Windsor-Smith, as far as I understand, is the...
I don't think he colored it.
Did he not color? I was going to ask you that.
But
there is a letterer, and there's a...
Oh, no, he must have colored it.
He must have colored it. I thought maybe he did, but I wasn't
sure.
Well,
that makes sense, because that Iron Man issue I showed you at the end of Armor Wars
is colored just like it.
It's colored just like
and has lots of wires.
Well, lots of wires.
Windsor-Smith is all about the wires.
The only other thing I'd ever... Or the only thing because I've never read this. The only thing I'd ever read that was like that, or the only thing I'd ever read by Barry Windsor-Smith was the epilogue issue of Armor Wars, which looks like identical to this.
Now, I don't want to freak everybody out when I make this statement. I had a somewhat similar experience with this rereading it as I did with Hush. Not because I don't love it, because I love this, but it was nothing like I remembered it. And I had that when I finally reviewed Hush, and then that was a case of, oh, this story makes no sense.
We all remember where we were that day.
I remember this being a really fast read. I'm not saying it's a slog, but I remember this being a really quick read. I remember it not having a lot of dialogue. I don't remember the twist ending.
Well, and that was
so much of this is not at all the way I remembered it, but but certainly the atmosphere and the tension and the sense of urgency, the main stuff that matters, and what the book's all about, of course, the animal and the human condition stuff, and the supposed monster versus the real monster. All of that I remembered, but this is a wordier book than I remember.
Well, and that was one of the things that I'd said, because I'd never read it, I was always under the impression it was not a wordy book. And here's the thing,
I have for years been describing this book incorrectly. I'm glad
it's not exactly a wordy, like, there's a lot of, it's weird. There's a lot of text that is unimportant. It's almost atmospheric. There's a lot of text that you don't really need to read, but you do read because it's adding to the tension of the moment. But it's a lot of people just being like, you know, up the levels on this, you know, adjust this. And
you've never seen the word feed in a book more times than in this. This is like if 24 was a horror film. I mean, it's in real time, a lot of it. And I mean, we skip places. You know, there's times where Wolverine is sleeping, and you don't really need to know what's going on there. But when we're in the moment, it feels like we get every agonizing, meticulous piece of what is happening always. And I think that's very effective.
And I think part of the reason that it's like that is that this was originally serialized 8 pages at a time in Marvel Presents.
Yeah. So it really takes its time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really...
How do you think it reads better? I mean, I really liked sitting down and getting this all in one
I don't know,
sitting.
because I didn't read it as it was coming out.
Did you do this in one sitting, or did you take a couple times?
I think it was 2.
Okay. How long in total do you think it took you to read this book?
30 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that.
I took an hour and a half with it.
Interesting.
and I had read the first, like, quarter to a third of it last week, and decided when I finally got back to it so that we could do this video that I would go back from the beginning, and I slowed myself down real hard because I realized how much storytelling was happening in panels outside of the actual dialogue and narration boxes. And of course narration is always just people talking in the background. That's one thing I really like about this too, is that you're looking at these great, I mean, often hideous and really brutal splash pages that you could just hang on a wall, but a lot of the dialogue that's happening isn't over the heads of the people who are talking. It's often, you're looking at Wolverine and it's almost like if he were awake and conscious right now, this is what he'd be hearing, yeah.
Yeah, no, one of the really strange things is there's a point near the end where I felt confused, and I'm still confused, and maybe you can explain to me what is happening.
I don't think I'll be able to. Let's find out.
I went to flip back through to, like, get back to the beginning of, like, the sequence and be like, okay, so when does this thing happen? Because I don't remember it, and I realized, I was like, oh man, like half of this book is when Wolverine goes crazy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like that reading it. Like, it feels like you spent so much time before, yeah, so I was really, like, that's half this book.
One criticism, I guess I would have to call this a criticism, because I feel like this is a book that, no, and that got easier, but we'll talk about that. We're speaking in riddles, because Eric and I have discussed part of this before, but before recording. No, I feel like this is one of those books that needs a second read. And I didn't give it 2 reads, I gave it like a read and a half. But as I was reading at the beginning, I was very confused about whether or not I was looking at flashbacks or flash forwards, or how exactly the Wolverine in the experiment stuff was being intercut with the Wolverine before he gets picked up stuff. And then I realized the whole symbol representation of the the Christian flop house he's staying at, the prophecy, and I realized, oh, he's dreaming all of this. And so, and that's weird, and we'll have to talk about that, because I don't really understand how he's having premonitions. Am I getting that correctly? It seems like he's getting premonitions, and prophecy is supposed to be like a symbol for it, which is a really obvious symbol. But anyway, so but at first I thought we were like, that was the actual present day, and we were and the flashbacks were him in his apartment and things. And then after a while I realized, oh, we're going linear until the end, and then I wasn't sure if it was, and then it turns out that it actually kind of still is. And so I don't think, are we ever in flashback in this? I don't think we are.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you see why I think it takes maybe a couple of reads. Let me tell you why I slowed it down so much. It was 2 things. First of all, I completely glossed over Experiment X X-Men and thought that was so cool. And it means nothing as far as I can tell, except just so you know, you are reading an X-Men comic. And by the way, I'm jumping around. 1992, 1993. I think the letter in the back, who wrote that particular letter?
Larry Hama.
Well, there's 2. There's 2. Because there's this thing about the creators. And then
this one is Larry Hama.
Yeah.
Who is...
And he basically just kind of gives a review of it, really. What were you going to say?
He is, he's probably most well known for, he's the writer of pretty much all of G.I. Joe at Marvel, but he's writing Wolverine at this point. Or, I think he's still writing Wolverine at this point.
That's what I thought. I knew I had some of his stuff.
He comes in the 30s, and he stays on till like 150. He has a long run of Wolverine.
It is that letter. Hama talks about how in his mind it's a big deal that there's nothing gimmicky in this book for Wolverine fans. So
and one of them is wrong.
He never puts on the costume. Which one is wrong?
Snicked.
I'm trying to make a point.
Sorry.
Where does Snicked ever happen?
It's the only time Wolverine consciously pulls his own claws.
Well, that's what I was waiting for. I never saw it though. That happened somewhere.
Yeah.
Is that in there?
Yeah. It's when he.
You have to make sure and point it out to me so I can put it on the video.
When he first starts going crazy.
You can do it now.
Oh, okay. But when he first starts going crazy is the only time it says Snicked in the book. And
Is it real subtle? Is it real small?
Yeah, well, and if you notice, all the times he pops his claws before that, it's around Snick, but it's never Snicked.
Yeah.
When he does it of his own volition, it says Snicked, and I think that's cool.
No, that's great. I was waiting for that to happen. I never noticed it, if it does. So that's cool. But anyway, but like he doesn't put on the costume. He's not doing like Wolverine-y
He doesn't sound the best there is.
Yeah, and it's not splashy. It's a horror book before it's anything. It looks more like an alien book.
Yeah,
than it does anything else. But I think it's important to mention that we didn't do this kind of thing much right then. Like this is a real Miller kind of move. Like you take the guy out of the costume.
Yeah.
And it's not really about the superhero stuff, so it's a story that takes place in that universe, but it's of a different ilk.
It's the thing that the movie got wrong.
And it's very much and Logan feels like this. Like tonally. That movie.
Yeah.
This is the closest thing I've read so far that feels like that movie to me. They're two totally different things.
Yeah.
But it makes you wish that director
did Weapon X.
In that he went ahead and went back and did Weapon X. Because don't you feel like this would make for a wonderful horror film?
Yeah.
Could just be a short film. I think you could even get an hour and a half out of it. I mean, if you did this book straight, I think you totally could. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is here, right now, is to say that I think because it's a bigger deal then that you would have something, especially in something called Marvel Presents, where you would expect costumes and things. I think he intentionally puts the X-Men thing at the beginning to both note, yes, you really are looking at an X-Men thing, but also, this will be the only reference to it. Because otherwise, in the story, it doesn't really mean anything, I don't think. But as I went through, I started slowing myself down real hard because the first time around I didn't notice these things, and you learn so much about the unnamed professor and Cornelius in these first few pages that if you don't slow yourself down, you won't realize things that the book kind of hints at and tells you a little bit later, but that you would already know if you were paying attention to them in the first couple pages. So we know just from the beginning that Cornelius is out of work and maybe even being kind of like chased after or something. We're not sure because he is a mercy killer. We get that in this in this headline at the beginning. That I guess he was like doing assisted suicides and things, and must have been drummed out of the medical profession. And so there's a lot of stuff we learn about them and about Wolverine. I don't know if you read this, but I read as much of this dossier as I could.
I can't remember if I read it or not. Maybe
not. And we find out through this that Logan was discharged, and probably dishonorably discharged, from the Canadian military. It says Ontario at the top. And there's alcohol abuse, which is interesting because of the healing factor, and it says self-destructive tendencies, and it's kind of warning people not to hire him for anything because he's mentally unstable. And so these things are important because they tell us why the Weapon X program was going after Logan, and that he wouldn't be missed if they picked him up. And if you read at the speed I tend to read, you don't miss that stuff.
I think I missed a lot of that.
So I took, as I said, a full hour and a half to read this, because I just slowed down everything and took in everything. There's a panel toward the beginning here that I don't understand. Where is it? So when he's in his apartment, there's this. Oh, it's this bit. What is he doing in this panel? What is this? What is happening here?
He is injecting a rat.
Why is he injecting a rat?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Is that what that is?
It looks like it to me.
I thought that was like his own mouth, and he was doing something to himself. Unless that's supposed to be part of the premonition. Like, I can't tell. I can't tell if this is in the apartment or part of the premonition. And this is part of the problem with this, like, jumping forward premonition thing, is some of these panels I'm a little bit confused by. And would love anyone who has read this to explain them to me.
And we talked about this when I first started reading it, and you first started reading it, was the panels don't follow traditional panel structure. They have a tendency to move in a U.
Yes.
And sometimes the dialogue balloons lead you that way, but when you first start reading it, you've been trained so hard that you don't move like that, you know, and you get used to it as you're reading. It's part of the rhythm of the piece, but it's very strange when you first start reading it that it goes like this. And some of the dialogue, the way it is you can almost read it out of order.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't follow its information. You could read it. You can read it going this way, or you can read it going this way. It usually flows better this way. But reading it this way, you're not completely confused. I don't know. It's very interesting.
And there are places even outside of the U shape where I'm a little bit confused about order, about just where I'm supposed to look. He links up narration boxes so that you will, if it's out of the normal order your eyes would go, because we live in the Western world and we read left to right, you will go in the order he tells you to because it's connected. And that helps sometimes, but there are places where it's confusing.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, doing the U thing, so traditionally the way you read a comic, when you put a dialogue balloon that's in the middle of two panels, it goes down. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes he'll put a dialogue balloon that's a little off the panel and onto the next panel, and my brain tells me I'm supposed to go like this, but I'm supposed to keep reading like this. So there is some...
What do you think the point is of that?
Maybe you're supposed to be disoriented?
Why do you think he's messing with modern convention that way? Yeah, that was the sense I got, and also sometimes it felt like, not the U-shape, but just when you had bits that were all over the place while we're looking at Logan inside the tank especially, it's like that's in the tank where the words are hitting it, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, that might be. But no, it's a little disorienting to read. Like I said, you get used to it. You get used to the flow of it for the most part.
There's a rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, look, there's next there.
And it's definitely, using the medium for all it's worth. I mean, it is another great example of a thing that I think would adapt okay, but it is a comic book.
There's a novel version of this, and I'm sure it's no good, but I could imagine this could make a really good novel.
Maybe so, but it would have to be very different. I mean, like, you couldn't write it like that.
Yeah,
You'd write it differently. If I were going to make this a novel, I would write the entire thing from Cornelius's perspective. That I think would be the way to handle it.
Well, and it's interesting because
he seems to be kind of the most human person here. I mean, you have the assistant girl, and maybe she's human enough, but I feel like the most conflicted person is him, and she maybe seems a little typical here and there.
Yeah, well, and she's the naysayer. She's the person that, like, every time you look at an evil laboratory, you're like, well, why did you hire them?
Yeah.
They're the humanist here. Like, you're doing illegal experiments. Why would you get that person?
Usually it's just so that you have that perspective there, and it makes no sense that they would actually get hired, right? Because she's the pacifist, she's the animal rights activist.
Yeah. How did they wind up in Weapon X? I think it's interesting that...
And it makes them look stupid when they're like, oh, wait, this is what we're doing?
Is that... Wolverine's not really the protagonist of the piece. The book isn't from his perspective, which is what I assumed it was going to be.
It is in two places.
It is at the beginning.
And it starts to be when he gets his faculties back toward the end. We get in his head, and then we get back out of his head. And we go back after the twist when we find out that no one's dead.
Which I don't understand. That's my biggest question.
We'll talk about. Or that when he kills all those people, they're not dead. I'm going to assume that the guy he kills, that the professor throws in at the beginning, is actually dead. But maybe it would take another read. Am I right in saying that it is almost impossible to tell where the fiction begins and ends?
That's when I flip back.
Am I right?
When they show up again, and they're talking about, like, running a simulation, I was like, was he wearing a VR helmet? Like, at what point does the scene... I couldn't find it. I couldn't find when the scene breaks.
I assume
and what it is he's killing.
Well, okay, so...
Are they robot? Because they look human. They bleed.
I don't think he's killing anything. I think it's all in his head. But then I don't know how he gets from where he is to getting outside. Because remember, I think the tell is supposed to be that...
Because he's, like, working through floors and stuff.
Yeah, but I think the tell is supposed to be that they're able to read his dreams and his thoughts. And that would lead me to believe that they could create a simulation in his head of all those things happening. Because do you remember?
But it's only when he's hooked up to the thing, isn't it?
Maybe the helmet does it too.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Or the battery packs with the helmet. I'm not sure because that whole thing. Well, because remember,
and he's not wearing. That's the thing that threw me. He's not wearing the helmet when he's running around.
Well, maybe that's supposed to be the tell. Maybe that's how you know is once he's not wearing the helmet. That's when it's all in his head.
Okay.
Maybe that's what it's supposed to be.
Maybe that is what.
I'm not sure though.
Yeah.
Okay, so the big thing about that...
But they take it off. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing for me. When I went back and looked, it's not like all of a sudden...
Is that you're dealing with...
We physically see them remove it from his head. That's the bit that confused me.
Yeah, and then it's pages and pages before he finally... Oh wait, no, he's running out here. Yeah, I don't know when that's actually happening. Okay, but it's weird because it would have had to have already happened then. Maybe that is when the fiction starts because okay, you know that at least from the point that he's talking to that the professor, you're just gonna have to have read this to know what we're talking about. But at least the point. So in this book, Wolverine becomes Weapon X, and there's a scary professor and doctor guy in charge, and they're like conflicted in things, and you just read this book, and you'll know what we're talking about. Anyway, so here's the deal. At least from the point that he's talking to whoever is supposedly in charge, it has to be the fiction, because later Cornelius is like, wait, who were you talking to? I thought you were the only person in charge.
No, Cornelius says it was a real good bluff to act like you weren't the one that did it. You weren't in charge.
Right, you're right. And then the professor is like, yeah, you're right, it sure was. And you get the sense that there must have been someone else in charge. So anyway.
There's the one snicked.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's the
real
one
subtle.
snicked.
It's real subtle. Because then it's Shuck again.
Yeah, it's the first time of his own faculties.
I like the choices of some of those words because they sound real, like you said, like he's not doing it intentionally. So he seems clumsy. He seems cumbersome. Yeah. Okay, so let's just tackle that whole thing, I guess. Unless you want to get into some more generalized thoughts before we get to the end.
I do, because one of the big questions I have reading this book.
Let's just discuss what the Weapon X program is according to Windsor-Smith and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, but anybody, what we're gonna say?
Well, the one big thing that I questioned while reading this was backwards and forwards. I've not read a lot of Wolverine comics. I want to know how much of this is him building from images we'd seen, if this is all original, if this is the first time we see any of this stuff.
I wasn't sure if he came up with a helmet or not. That's the thing I don't know.
Yeah,
I thought about looking it up. I should have done that.
There's a lot of stuff in this where I'm, like, because the thing with the boss, because it's very clear that the professor does have a boss, where he's like, yes, of course, what a cunning ruse. Is that...
And he's also talking to him at the beginning, and he leaves... and Cornelius doesn't know why, because he doesn't want to look like an idiot. Remember that scene toward the beginning? Because he didn't know Wolverine was a mutant. And he says to his boss, well, I had to leave the room so they didn't think I was stupid because I'm supposed to be the only person in charge, and I didn't know he was a mutant. So there has to be an actual person.
So my question is this setting up something that has already happened in the Wolverine books? Or is this setting up something that was intended to be paid off?
And that's what's annoying about looking at this as a piece, because it does feel like it is, as Hama says, of a piece. The problem with that is it sets up this magnificent mystery that's never paid off. Like, if you read this all by itself, you get to the end and you go, well, wait a minute, who was in charge? I want to know. And you never know the answer to that.
And I don't know whether that was a mystery when this piece was made or not.
Yeah.
I don't know if
it was paid off later.
If I've been reading Wolverine comics, do I already know the answer to that? I'm really curious about Wolverine comics around this.
Yeah.
And how much of this is Windsor-Smith's creation, and how much of this is him building off of images and fragments we already had about Wolverine.
And so it doesn't function perfectly on its own in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a piece. It is beginning, middle, and end.
Absolutely.
But, and I think if you know nothing about X-Men comics or Wolverine, this is still a very readable thing, especially if you like revenge thrillers, which I love that Wolverine, with this as kind of a starting place, and again, we had lots of Wolverine up to this point, like, the Wolverine solo book's been running for like 4 or 5 years by this point. That's what, 87?
Yeah.
And so it's 4 or 5 years old now. So obviously that stuff had to have informed this to some capacity. But I like the idea that the first thing he does before he gets, or as he's getting his animanium, is revenge thriller. Because Wolverine stories are often revenge thriller.
Can I complain about the adamantium for a second?
Yeah, I wanted to get into all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, because I have questions about this and how it functions with the rest of the continuity.
So there's a thing in this book that is, I guess, generally accepted as canon until we get to, there's a big X-Men event somewhere in the 90s. And this is a discussion that people have had about the bone claws versus Wolverine not having bone claws. And a lot of people don't like the bone claws. They think they're dumb. Especially the big, because I don't know if you know that's in Fatal Attractions. It's when Magneto rips all of the adamantium out of him. That is when we find out he has bone claws.
See, and I always have to be reminded of that. I always think Origin did it first.
I like the bone claws. One, I just like how the bone claws look. I think they look really good aesthetically. This book doesn't make sense to me. And because the explanation we're given for the claws...
do tell, because I have a totally different read than I think what you're going to say.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the explanation for the claws is that there was a surplus of adamantium put in his hand.
Right.
Now, they say it's a mistake, but then it's alluded to that's not actually a mistake, it is intentional.
Yeah. And that whoever the man upstairs is probably programmed it that way, or had the professor program it that way. They're lacing him with adamantium. It is much easier for me to believe that he has mutated claws that are laced with adamantium versus we put some more there and his body magically formed them into claws and created a complex moving mechanism. Doesn't work for me. Yeah.
And maybe I wouldn't think that if I didn't have an alternative. Okay, but I'm always pro bone claws on that.
I was giving it the benefit of the doubt on that, and that we weren't told what it really was because we're from the perspective of people that are left in the dark. Now, one thing, of course, is you got to have historical perspective and remember that things that we're comparing this to aren't around yet. But even still, we know that Wolverine has claws, and that presumably we knew before this that he got them from the Weapon X program. We knew that. So you would have expected that they put them there on purpose and that they created the mechanism. So this just, as a piece in 92 or 93, you can still make that criticism. Well, wait a minute, that doesn't seem to make sense. My assumption was that, as you alluded to, whoever the man is upstairs programmed this in such a way where they are in the dark and that's how they're reading it, and it even doesn't make sense to them, but the mechanism and all that was just built into the program. The other possibility, and I want this to be the case because I think it could kind of work, except their technology is too advanced, and really any hospital's technology is too advanced. So
is it that he does have bone claws and they don't know, and that's why they think it's extra?
But they've got X-rays, I would assume, so they should be able to. So that's the whole thing. I don't think this necessarily contradicts the bone claws if they're stupid and they never X-ray his hands. but
there's too much in his hands. We're not going to look into that.
It's the only way that makes sense. So yes, that whole thing is kind of strange. I also, and I always question this with X-Men, with Wolverine stuff, and again, these are things that I wouldn't have thought of if this was the only thing I was looking at, and probably X-Men stuff up to this, but we've had the movies and stuff now. One thing I always wonder with Weapon X is if they don't know, okay, especially this, wouldn't everyone on board have to know he was a mutant, or at least what his power was, to even think this would work? How isn't everyone going, wait, this is going to kill him instantly, right? Like,
and there's no clarification ever in this book where someone says, of course the only reason he was able to survive this was because he's a mutant.
Yeah.
But that's always the explanation I've understood, and I feel like has been brought up, is this happened to Wolverine, and Wolverine has this, and they didn't do it to more people because it only worked on Wolverine because he has the healing factor.
They treat it more like he's picked because, and I mean, this should be the perfect storm. He's picked because he's got the healing factor and he can survive it. The healing factor will also make it so he can pop the claws out and heal that. You remember the professor likes it when he feels pain, doesn't mind that he feels pain when he does that. That scene where he leaves him out in the cold is like real sad and kind of chilling, I think.
Yeah.
Chilling. It's cold. But also he's unloved, he's uncared about, he's screwed up his life, so he's in, like, the perfect place to do that. And then thirdly, and the main thing that we talk about in this book is, he acts like an animal, and it's questionable whether or not he should even be considered human, which is, of course, a justification and an excuse before it's really true at all. And, of course, we make a big deal toward the end with the animal rights activist chick, sort of, that shouldn't even be there, who's like, no, when you look in his eyes, he's clearly, I forget if she says that or if it's Cornelius, but when you look in his eyes, clearly something there is human. It seems like the main reason he's picked is because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I have questions about Wolverine.
Especially since the main professor guy that's running everything doesn't know he's a mutant, and I don't think knows what his power is. But
yeah.
But would he have to? That's the part that I'm not really quite getting.
Well, and there's two things about this that I know current continuity contradicts. And I'm interested to know when certain decisions are made.
With retconning.
His name is Logan.
Yeah.
Before they capture him.
Yeah.
The way we always kind of play it now is Weapon X made him Logan. His name is Logan when they capture him.
Well, no, that's not what Origin does.
Isn't it? Does he go by Logan at the end of Origin? Yeah, he does because of his dad. Right?
It was always his name. It's his dad's name. It's James Logan Howlett.
But it's because his dad is Logan, because his half-brother is Dog Logan, and his dad is Logan, and it was an affair. And so that's not like his birth name, that's his dad's name.
I thought it was his middle name, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I don't think so. I think it's a reveal, and then he takes the name when he goes into high school.
See, I want it to be his middle name, because Logan is my middle name, and that's why I go by Captain Logan, and my first name is James. My real actual first name is James. I brought this up before. You know what's really funny? I actually realized this, and I was an idiot for not thinking of it before. I actually realized that my name, besides Howlett, is Wolverine's name on a commentary podcast with Shades at Night. I was like, wait a minute, my name is Wolverine's name! I always knew about the Logan part, but I forgot about the James part. But anyway, I don't know that that's a contradiction. And you notice that that on that I'm getting a lot off this piece of paper here. Okay, so Logan, there is probably words in front of that.
Yeah. You
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I mean, like, that's probably to him right then his last name.
And they call him Mr. Logan, which I thought was funny.
Yeah, that's great.
But some of the stuff where we see Logan beforehand and from that document, he's not a nice person.
No.
And I want to know if that was established here.
And I feel like that we've retconned.
Or did we already have a sense of...
Have we retconned in the comics? I mean, that's certainly what we did with Origins.
I mean...
excuse me, with X-Men Origins. He's just a lumberjack and he's okay. Like,
there's some stuff, I think, in the Origins book. There's some stuff in the mid-2000s where I think we really double down on, like, Wolverine was a bad person before he was Wolverine. But he's also hanging out with Captain America in World War II as a soldier.
Yeah. Well, sure, but
I want someone
in the military, and I thought it was, and I wonder if this is picked up anywhere. One of the things I thought was really interesting. I'm sure you picked up on this. The idea that the reason he was in the military is because he wanted to die.
Yeah.
That he is hoping that being at war, eventually he's put out of his misery because he's immortal and he's tired of living already. So we're already here. Windsor-Smith is saying, who knows how old he is? Mm-hmm. He might go way, way back.
Yeah, yeah. I want someone to make a video that takes everything we have ever learned about Wolverine.
We're doing that.
No.
Right now.
No, this requires more research than either of us are willing to do.
Oh, okay.
I want someone to take everything that we have ever said that happens to Wolverine pre-Weapon X, and I want them to put it all together and tell me if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I bet you it doesn't. I bet you it is full of contradictions.
Yeah, but this is true of so many things in comics.
Yeah, but I feel like his is probably even more so.
Probably so.
Because you get so much of it in fragments, I bet you those fragments do not add up to a cohesive whole at all. But that's neither here nor there with this book.
Can I ask you this question? Do you get the sense at the end of this book, because maybe I wasn't picking up on something, do you get the sense by the end of this that he had his memories erased?
No!
Because I don't.
No!
That was confusing. You know, it's funny. I'm talking about how much I love this book. I'm confused by a lot of things in this book connected to the rest of Wolverine continuity. on its own as a piece, besides the fact that I never know who's in charge and I really want to know that.
And when we get into the simulation.
Like, is that a problem? Do you think it's a problem that when that we build up this big mystery and by the end we're not told? I'm just saying this is a piece. Not knowing if that's somewhere, like, if folks know this, like, well, Cap, it's in this other place. Okay, cool. But I'm just saying, if I just pick this up, looking at it of a piece, as Hama calls it, is that a problem?
Okay, I'm going to say...
I can't decide, but I was a little disappointed not getting it.
I'm going to say, if it's established beforehand, it's not a problem. It's going in assuming that you know the answer to that, and assuming that if you read it without knowing the answer to that, you'll assume that the answer is somewhere.
Yeah.
If the answer doesn't exist when this book is written, I'm not okay with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's Mr. Sinister.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
He was in Origin too.
I was thinking it probably was Sinister.
I don't think it's
Sinister. That was my thought.
It's probably Stryker.
It's Stryker.
It's not Stryker.
No, it's not. It's not.
But we should just call him Professor Stryker. He doesn't get a name.
There are no
He's
exits.
Professor Stryker.
There are no exits that way, Wolverine. I love that he's a nameless professor. I like that he's just called the Professor, because it's impossible not to compare him to Professor X because of that.
And he's bald.
Yeah. He really is, in a way, kind of the antithesis to Professor X, kind of.
I wonder if he comes back, because I feel like with this ending he shouldn't, but I feel like I've seen him show up in other things.
Yeah, and there's a guy that looks a lot like him in Deadpool, and that's, I'm sure, intentional. In fact, come to think of it, the Doctor guy, I might be talking out of both sides of my mouth right now because it's been a while since I've read that, but the guy in the early Deadpool issues by, help me out,
oh, Joe Kelly.
Joe Kelly.
Yeah.
It looks like almost, if I'm remembering right, like the guy that ran the program that turned Deadpool into Deadpool. Is almost like an amalgamation between Cornelius and the Professor in this.
Yeah.
Like they look kind of, it looks like he put those two guys together.
Yeah. And we know he's alive because Deadpool goes and talks to him.
Yeah, and he's a fascinating character, and he comes back and he's on a path to redemption. He's trying to help Deadpool because he feels bad for what he did to him.
Yeah.
And yeah, that stuff's all great.
Yeah.
Read that, it's great.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's disturbing.
Joe Kelly's the only Deadpool you need to read.
It's really disturbing, but it's wonderful.
Yep.
I mean, that's not the right word, but...
So some of the things we've talked about that. We've talked about this with things like this.
Yeah.
Where this is such an iconic piece. In things like I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but like in Dark Knight Returns, there are things in Dark Knight Returns that happen there for the first time, and you have seen them so many. Like, I don't know if you know this, the pearls come from Dark Knight Returns.
I know that. Yeah, right.
So,
although I think you told me that first, I know that because of you. Yeah.
And every time we've ever done a flashback since then,
even BVS, every time.
We always do the pearls
in the most hilarious of ways. Why would you put? I mean, it looks cool, Snyder, but why would you put why?
And it's interesting going back to the source and seeing the things that have always been in my brain that are not here. One of the big ones, not to go back to the claws, but one of the big ones is
the claw.
I always remembered in the animated series, the '90s one, we see Wolverine in the tube, and he goes, "My hands, they're itchy," and then his claws popped out, and I assumed there's no way they came up with that. That it has to be in this book. It's not. Not only that.
You see him like burst out of the tank. That's not exactly what we see here.
Yeah, no, like a lot of the stuff that I associate with Weapon X isn't here.
Yeah.
It comes from other stuff later, and I think that's kind of interesting.
There's even some stuff in Origins, as much as I don't like that movie, that seemed like they were pulled because they were iconic imagery that I thought came from this, that don't really.
Yeah.
But when he looks at his claws like that, like that's not in here.
Yeah. Yeah. He has no moment of realization. Really? Like, he is completely mind controlled to this entire story, and even when he's not,
either mind controlled or just kind of brain dead.
Yeah, yeah.
Turned off, as they say.
And so it's very weird.
But I mean, I like that he's a complete victim through all this. But when you look at what we know about what he's done to himself that gets him to this place. I'm not saying he deserves it, but it is consequences of his own actions. Mm-hmm. Like I do like that he's. I mean, he's a victim certainly, but I like that if he led a better life, this couldn't have happened to him.
It's interesting because
if only he was a superhero in the first place, or had more of like Professor X's line of thinking, this couldn't have happened to him.
It's interesting because Origin is a book, and Origin is a book I have issues with, but. It is a piece.
Yeah.
It didn't need Origin 2. which came out a couple of years ago.
Real superfluous and doesn't even really feel like it necessarily.
I want a Weapon X too.
It's not terrible.
I want the story that gets him from where he is at the end of this to like working with Department H and the Canadian superheroes before he joins.
I'm sure that story's told someplace.
But I bet you it's not told all together. I bet you we get that stuff in pieces. I kind of want to know how he gets from here to.
It's just you'd think that part of the point of doing a Weapon X book would be to show how he loses his memories. And I get to the end of this and I feel like he's still just the Logan he was before, but now this has happened to him, and he's trying to figure out if he can reconcile the animal in the man.
The impression I get from this book is not that his memories have been wiped; it's that they've like turned off parts of his brain. Like he's just he's been like leveled down to like animalistic. But I don't get the sense that they've taken it away. It's just they've turned off parts of his brain, and when they turn back on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Cornelius
like he's like a robot.
Here's the thing. Cornelius does have a line where oh wow, I just turned right to this page. Oh great. Okay, so your interpretation is not exactly what they say. The problem is even if they are trying to eliminate those memories, when you
they should have shot him in the
when
head.
you get right with an anion bullet, we know that works. When you get to the I just love how Logan uses that. I just love that we bring that back. Here's why it's stupid. Let's make it great. Anyways, but you get to the end of this, and he keeps telling himself, like, my name is Logan, and he doesn't seem confused about who he is or anything. He also doesn't really talk about it, even to himself, but, like, and Windsor-Smith, for what little time he actually writes Wolverine as Wolverine, has a great voice for him. And
that's also something I have a question about.
And he sounds like himself and everything. But, okay, so here's the thing. And this is a really funny scene, too. When the professor is trying to control Logan, he says, "Logan, you're in my control." And then
yes, that scene. I love that scene.
And then Cornelius says, yeah, but you shouldn't use his former name, sir. We're trying to eradicate that stuff. He says eradicate, okay, which means they're trying to get rid of it. It's not just burying it, I would assume. Eradicate. But anyway, that scene's great because then he just keeps talking to him like that, and he goes, "You have one master, and it is me. You will do anything I say." And then Cornelius is like, "We haven't started yet. Stop talking to him. We haven't even turned the machine on." And then he's like, "Oh yeah," and then they just have two panels where they just look at each other, and they just like, "Please get on with it," and it's hilarious.
The way it plays here is
I like that part.
Is more like Bucky, where it's brainwashing.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like he won't have his memories. Like maybe it'll be a little hazy, but it'll come back to him. It's not the Wolverine I've always been led to believe that has no memory.
But I don't think you can read enough into that. Like when he says eradicate, like they're able to get into his head. And they're
having to condition him as opposed to just deleting it.
They're having to no, that's not what's happening. They're having to condition him to be controlled. But I think that's different from like how they're changing him from who he is to what they want him to be. I think there's a difference there. The fact that they have the technology to be able to look at what's in his head seems like they can maybe take engrams out of it. I also don't know if we know enough to really have this argument. I'm just saying that the technology seems real sophisticated.
Yeah, and that was a weird thing where I was like, this is really advanced.
Really advanced. But I like how graphic some of what's on the monitor is. The big argument through the whole thing for Wolverine is still a human being is his thirst for revenge on this guy. That he sees his face in his mind, he imagines killing him, and that's not just animalistic because this guy has done him wrong, and he's not just killing anything that moves. Like he doesn't want to kill people that don't deserve it. It's just that guy. And I love that there's that hideous shot where he's like put his claws right through the professor's face, and that
through his glasses.
That didn't actually happen. Yeah. And his like you never see his pupils. He's always hiding what's behind his eyes. I think that's a thing.
Yeah. You know who should make this movie? This is gonna be controversial.
Yeah.
Ang Lee.
Interesting.
This is a psychodrama.
Yeah.
Because there are things in this that are not realist. The professor is almost a cartoon character in places.
Sure.
Like, if this was a more...
I don't know how he got like that. I don't know who that guy is.
Well, if this was a more naturalistic piece, there's something we do with the Professor that I don't think works. It works in the piece the way the piece is presented. He has to keep telling us that he's worried that Wolverine's going to kill him. Because Wolverine, like, lashed out at him, and he's like, he tried to kill me. We have to kill him. He tried to kill me. And then it keeps coming up. That works completely in and of itself. And maybe even the animal activist chick works a little bit better if you think of it as a psycho.
She's not really that. We just keep calling her that.
But maybe that makes a little bit more sense if you view it as a psychodrama, not an actual literal piece, kind of like Ang Lee's Hulk.
Yeah.
Which is why I say I think Ang Lee could actually do this.
Well, and we say this all the time. Real heightened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost surrealistic in places.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And I think Windsor-Smith likes that.
But yeah, the idea is supposed to be that the Professor is really more of an animal than Logan is because all he cares about is self-preservation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if that is the only thing that is foremost on your mind and people are just means to ends, that you'll use your environment any way you need to and you have no compassion for human life, then doesn't that make you more of an animal than an actual human being? And he tries to justify what he does to Wolverine by almost, in a way, kind of describing himself when he talks about Wolverine, I think is supposed to be the idea.
Yeah. There's a lot of, like, I'm better than him, and like, you're getting, like, but you're not.
I didn't quite need, no, he's not the monster, you're the monster. Just because, like, yeah, I get it. Like, that's, already in the piece.
One thing I'm not sure about, because you talk about how, like, Windsor-Smith has a good voice for Wolverine. I kind of don't like that. I don't like that he is immediately fully formed, the person that we will meet, a decade later or however long.
But what I like about it is, I don't think it's fully formed. I think it's always that kind of nature-nurture question where he had an identity. I've never bought into, and maybe this just kind of says something about my worldview. I don't know. Like, this is kind of an existential argument we can have. I've never cared for the Deadpool thing where he's the complete opposite before what happens to him. And now he's like this really jokey, happy-go-lucky, but like terrifying guy. But before he was like totally stoic and cold and didn't talk and never said anything. And like I'm much more by the movie version where he's not, where he's already jokey, but then he's dialed that up to 11 once he becomes Deadpool. So I kind of don't mind the idea that Wolverine already talks like Wolverine.
Well, and that's and
then it's just a nature-nurture question.
Well, and we disagree about this on with Origin, but I have the same issue with Origin, where it's like, and this is why he likes redheads, and this is why he says bub, and this, I'm like, we're 50 years before any of that happens.
But I would agree with you there more than I do here, because here it's more subtle than that.
Yeah, it's just kind of how he talks.
It's just how he talks. Yeah, and I like the idea that they couldn't completely eradicate his identity from him. If the idea is supposed to be that he really is still human, isn't it important that it's not just all the things that makes us all human, but it's also some of, at least, of what makes him him. And then later he's able to better himself, and he can change that identity and grow and mature, but he's still the same person.
And put possibly the suggestion that we are not the sum of our memories. Memories do not make us exactly
completely
who we are.
Yeah.
He's just that guy.
But on the other hand, there's the question of, was he a bad person before, even if his identity is more or less kind of the same, and then he learns things and he becomes a good person. So you're not naturally a good person or a bad person, but maybe you could describe him, because we don't know enough about him. Maybe you can describe him before the Weapon X program as not a good person, and then is it a matter of, well, he's been through some horrible things, and then he gets with somebody like Professor X, who's this idealist, and he learns.
Because he's not a good person when it comes to the X-Men, exactly.
No, yeah, sure.
He's a little off kilter. I think he's an assassin for Department H, because they sent him after the Hulk in his first appearance.
I just think it's an interesting identity question if he is already talking that way. I also guess you could have played it the other way too. Yeah, I don't know. Because what makes it interesting the other way is, let's say he murdered a whole bunch of people. I don't know that that's what happened, but let's say he murdered a whole bunch of people, and the Weapon X program happens to him, and he loses all of his memories, and then he becomes an X-Man and does a lot of good things for people. Is he still responsible for what happened before? Is he a completely different new person? I guess I'm making the argument that maybe he wouldn't be, but I don't know. And so that's just, one of those $10 million questions. Yeah. But I'm just saying that, especially here, I don't mind that he's kind of talking like Wolverine. He could have taken that way too far.
He's not saying bub or anything like that.
He doesn't have a credo,
which he does say in Origin.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I know you love that book. One day we'll do Origin.
Well, I'm not even.
And we'll talk about just how dumb it is that his claws coming out of these three knuckles.
But it's just like this, where I think I love that book. I haven't read it in 12 or 14 years. I don't know. I've always talked this up, and again, I do really like this.
It's a good book. I don't know if it's as seminal as
let's praise it more, because we're just asking a lot of questions.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of things I don't understand. Well, before
it's a very ambiguous book.
We can
and maybe that's intentional.
It is really ambiguous. We can maybe do some more generic praising, especially about art and stuff here in a little bit. Maybe not so generic here in a little bit. But before we do that, should we talk finally a little bit more about what is confusing about that ending?
Yeah,
and how I don't really know what's going on.
Okay, because my confusion we talked about. I could not figure out when does he start killing people, when does he not kill? Because he goes through the floor to the professor, and I'm like, okay, so if the professor wasn't there, did he still go through the floor? And like, do they have to fix that? Like,
yeah.
Did he still wreck the whole?
They just don't.
Were they just watching him run around the halls doing this?
No, again, I think they were watching his mind.
But then he runs outside, and it's all one sequence. It's not he doesn't get up from the chair again and then go outside.
That's the part I don't get. Yeah. Okay. So no, my question, and I question all that too. But the other thing I wondered is if it is all in his mind, or if even they're like play acting or something. But like they can't be, because if they're in the room with him, he would kill them. So they can't actually have been there with him.
Are they speaking their parts? Because the professor has the whole thing about
I have no
somebody
idea.
over.
That's my point, though. Is why would he reveal that if he didn't have to?
Yeah, because he's all like, yes, what a cunning ruse.
Why?
If he didn't think he was going to die,
why would he have to do that? And remember, he's ignoring Cornelius, and he's flipping out, and he's all in his head, and like that had to have all been in Wolverine's head. So the only thing that makes sense to me is somehow rather Logan knows all these things about all these people. But that doesn't make sense either.
Is it possible that this was written issue to issue?
Is it possible that he didn't rewrite it all to match? Well, like he comes up with the twist at the 11th hour.
Because if it's coming out and eight pages at a time.
Maybe that's what happened. But interesting that you never hear people criticize it. Now, I haven't heard a lot of talk about anything specifically in this book.
I've never heard anyone specifically talk about this book.
People say it's great.
Yeah.
And they want Wolverine to always have the head thing. Presumably because of this.
I love his hair in this. They messed up so bad in Apocalypse. Okay, don't give him the visor.
I know, but I was gonna talk to you about that because after reading this again, it's not a problem.
Because there are pieces where he doesn't have the visor.
Yeah, and he only has the visor at the beginning, and then they take it off of him. And he doesn't. The visor limits his ability to see, and the main reason that he's got the headset is so they can control him. The headset's not there just for the visor. Like you always described it, like, well, what's the point of the headset if it doesn't have? Well, because it's mind control. So
no.
That's what you always said it. You're like,
no, my issue.
Oh, you just think it looks stupid without the visor.
I think it looks stupid without the visor. My issue is that is how it iconically looks. If you're gonna do it, do it.
Or at the very least, show it for a second and then rip it off or something.
Yeah.
Because clearly, I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate when I say that. Clearly, the main reason they did that was so that Hugh Jackman could have 5 seconds of FaceTime. But you could still have
because I'm supposed to get excited. I'm like, but that's not the thing that I iconically know. Yeah. That's not what all the covers and pictures are. He's always got the visor. I don't care that they take the visor off sometimes. Iconically, when you think of that, if you're gonna throw it in your movie as like a cameo, give it to me.
And it's in there because they never gave us like anything close to the real Weapon X origin or. And again, you can change it and make it great. It doesn't have to be exactly this.
No.
But the problem with the origin is not with the origins is not that
it's not because it's different.
It's that it's stupid.
Yeah,
like that's the problem with it. And reading this again, even though X-Men 2 says he volunteered, and with the Stryker scenario, that is interesting. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that we can't go that way, but I like this. I like him as a victim. I like him being picked up off the street like this. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's just. I don't want to get back into circles with all the arguments we've made about Apocalypse before, but you left us in a place at the end of Days of Future Past where you could have done this.
Yeah.
And it could have been really interesting.
Yeah.
Or you could have done something a lot closer to this.
You could have done this instead of Logan. I'm not saying that we should have. You could have done
that
this.
Would have been
you could have done
sad,
this,
but yeah.
You could have done this instead of Logan as an R-rated movie, as Hugh Jackman's last piece of I'm going to go back and do it right. and then move forward. Now, you could have actually done Weapon X
at the risk of
for this new continuity.
At the risk of just rehashing things until we finally get them right. And by right, I just mean a good story. Yeah. That's all I mean.
Yeah.
Just not gimmicky. And they're just for the sake of gimmick. If what we could do is we could, if when we finally recast Wolverine, we could start here.
We should start here.
We could.
And I think it should be R. I think you do Weapon X, you do it R. Like Logan.
I think any solo Wolverine movie that ever happens again will be R now. Look how much money that rate did.
Yep.
Okay, what else do you want to say about this? Anything else we should say about the art? Because obviously
he loves wires.
There's some great visual storytelling in this. There's some really interesting panel layout choices. He does. It goes without saying, really cinematic. He does a lot of really good insert shots. And sometimes I don't know exactly what I'm looking at or why I'm looking at it, but he reminds me a little bit of Watchmen in some of the choices of insert shots and at angles and with like panels with blood on them and stuff like that.
No, there's definitely a Watchmen influence on this.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because given the work, given the character, and given the tone, you would expect more of a Dark Knight Returns vibe. I don't get a lot of Dark Knight Returns in this, but I do get Watchmen.
Yeah.
Watchmen's definitely an influence on the art in this, but especially the coloring. The coloring feels really Watchmen to me. So one of the things I think is interesting is that. Because I don't know about you, I counted 8 pages, like, for the first couple of issues. Like, I wanted to see, like, I think this is the break. You know, I counted backwards.
The first time I was reading it through, I read it in issues, so I had that. And then you finished the actual trade, so I picked up the trade and started reading it that way.
That's a great page.
When I first got this years ago, I thought it was originally published this way. I thought it was just a graphic novel. I didn't realize.
Oh, interesting.
So when I found the issues, I was like, wait a minute, this is it. Marvel Presents, okay. And I thought Marvel Presents was always a reprint book, and then I realized it wasn't.
Yeah, no, that was there is a Marvel book like that, but it's not Marvel Presents. Marvel Tales, maybe Marvel Tales.
It's whatever reprinted Silver Surfer. And some other
Marvel
things.
Tales?
I forget. Yeah.
But anyways, one of the things I think is I found really interesting. I don't think it ever ends on the splash page. The splash page is always part of the story.
Yeah.
We complain about this all the time about modern comics.
And it's never a character reveal, but how could it be?
Yeah, well, it's always the last page is a splash page of something dramatic.
Oh, man.
He doesn't use it that way.
Yeah.
He uses splash pages as it's meant to be used to make a moment work, or because like sometimes it's just Wolverine in the chair, but it's really evocative.
I'm not saying you can't do it the way we do it.
But it's the only. But it's like the only way we do it.
We overuse it that way.
That's the end of every issue.
That's not true. We also use it as the third or fourth like big actiony like hero standing on a rooftop or something to put the credits.
Well, I'm not saying we don't use splash pages anywhere but the last page, but I think it's interesting that he I don't think he ever ends it. I don't even think the last page is a splash page.
Well, that part doesn't count.
Yeah, no, that part doesn't.
That's like an epilogue.
Yeah, which is confusing because it jumps backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't a splash page.
Right.
This
is
real,
close to a splash.
This is real EC Comicsy. But yeah.
Cool. That was a good point you made.
You'll see the artwork I just said is real is really EC Comicsy. You see it. You see it's gonna be right. It's gonna be right here.
No, I'm not doing it. Anything else you want to talk about with this book?
The epilogue's pointless, and
it kind of is. Yeah.
Like it almost feels like.
Aren't you glad you read it?
Yeah, I am glad I read it because I'd never read it. I was remiss to not have read it. I don't think it's amazing. Like I kept going.
I love the mood it puts me in.
Sure. But I kept going back and forth while I was reading it, trying to figure out if I'm marred by my own sensibilities.
Yeah.
Where like I'm like, well, this isn't as smart as it thinks it is. This isn't as provocative as it thinks it is. And I'm like, but I read things from like I feel like I've read things around this. Like I don't think this is as provocative as Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen or no,
I don't think it's in that
Born
class.
Again.
I also don't know that it matters that it's not in that class. You know what I mean? Like, it's a story people talk about, but I think it's more because Weapon X is an important thing that happens in Wolverine's history.
Yeah.
And because of some iconic moments. You know, is this like a brilliant piece of art or a brilliant story? I don't know. I think it has brilliance in it.
I think I think this is a book that is.
I think it was really fresh at the time.
Sure.
You know, and I think that it was influential. And I don't think you can deny that it's at least somewhat influential.
I think this is a book that is held up and will continue to be held up because it's tied to a major character.
But I think it's held up by people that haven't read it.
Yes, I absolutely. But like
it's more key issue status than anything.
Yes,
you know, yes, Death of Gwen Stacy is brilliant, but how many people talk about that because they've heard of it, not because they've read it?
I kind of wonder, like, if this was a Moon Knight story.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you go back to it and you're like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to break the formula. You're trying to be real edgy, and like, you did a pretty good job, but it's not going to be remembered.
You wanted to be literary.
This is remembered because it's Wolverine.
Yeah.
I think it's a good piece, but I think it has the status it has because it's Wolverine. I don't think it's because... I don't actually think it was actually as groundbreaking as we want to think it is.
And here's what's ironic about that. I don't think what makes it good is that it's a Wolverine story.
No. No.
Like, it actually is. Like, I think the fact that people have read it and know about it is because it's Wolverine, but I think it's just a good horror story. Because it is kind of a horror story.
Yeah.
And like, the confusing parts about it are mostly mythology things. If you read it in a vacuum, it's much better.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting that the cover is a page. Is a page. And this is not the cover that we put on the trade on the modern trade. I don't know what it is, but it's not this.
No, and I think it's sort of a strange choice.
I think it's Wolverine like this.
Like, there are a lot of other splash pages I might have thought to put there, you know, before this.
Yeah, when I got to that, I was like,
thinking, I was dumb. For a second, I was kind of thinking, well, maybe they didn't use that because he's not wearing clothes, but he's not wearing clothes on this. So
if it was me, there's a splash page where
I was going to try to find one
where it's him sitting in a chair. That's what I would have made. Not that one.
Not that one. There's one like that I think is great though.
Yeah.
Is it? It's not this one, is it?
No.
No. Because he's hunched over there. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll find it.
We'll find. Yeah.
We're
just gonna sit here and read this book again.
Put it up on. We're gonna put it on the screen. No,
we're not.
There it is. That's why I made the cover.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That's great. There's an action figure of that I always wanted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's pretty cool Weapon X with the head.
I think it's interesting.
The helmet.
Again, this is like the retrospective, the not really knowing what was going on around this book. Sabretooth isn't in this.
Right.
I was always under the impression Sabretooth was an integral part of Weapon X. When they work together in Weapon X, but maybe they don't. Maybe they would just work together in Department H. Like, I don't know, but I always thought Sabretooth was tied to this somehow. No, I didn't think he was in this story.
Well, you get the sense that they still have some sort of control over him at the end. I mean, that's kind of the weird thing about the end of this.
But it seems like he's about to kill them. And
that's true. He does.
And I assume he's going to run out into the wild, and
maybe that's also still happening.
And be found by Mom and Pa Kent. But
right, yeah. No, I don't know what I was thinking when I said that. Yeah, I know how this book ends, but it's just for a second I was like, well, wait a minute, they're still in control. Oh wait, no, that's the big reveal at the end. Is no, it's still going to happen to them, and it's because they deserve it, and we're supposed to want to see that happen.
Yeah, but we don't get to see it.
No, we just we'll just have to imagine the fire, and also we saw it already.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, folks, thanks for watching. Sure appreciate it. And if you've read this, let us know what you thought of it. We'll be back with you again soon.
Explain the ending.
Explain the ending. We're a little bit befuddled about that. We're not real sure about it. Anyway, leave your comments, and also we will see you again shortly with another Comic Vault. And in the meantime, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
See you, folks.